morning, everybody. You're very welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar. This morning, I'm joined by Ciaran Hearn. Ciaran is coordinator of PastureBase. So, Ciaran, you're kind of covering for our speaker and also the Grass 10 team, all in one as such. So, normally, I suppose where we start, Ciaran, is kind of a quick update in terms of where the grass situation is, where the figures are at, and what's happening nationally. So I suppose, firstly, you're very welcome and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, James. So the grass situation at the moment, sure, we all know the weather is flying in most parts of the country at the moment, and the growth is probably higher than what we would have expected for the time of year. Looking at some of the kind of the growth figures from, say, the last couple of years, it's actually quite spot on. Even though it feels like the growth is a bit stronger maybe at the moment than what it has been previously, it's fairly close to what we would have expected. So hitting around 60 this week. We're actually, I think 57 is the growth figure that we had on dairy farms this week, and then down maybe a bit closer to 50 on some of the dry stock farms. But I suppose on those dairy farms it's hitting 57. What we're focusing on at the moment, I suppose, and what the lads in Grass 10 would be really focusing on at the moment is building covers for the autumn, I suppose, from a grass point of view, James. So we actually had a quick look at some of the figures, and we broke them down just in terms of the target. So I suppose if we think at the moment the most recent target is kind of the start of September and where guys should be hitting for that. So depending on your stocking rate, you've got to be hitting an average farm cover of between 750 and 1,000 on the 1st September. So 750 for the lower stock guys, kind of around 2.5, and up then hitting for an average farm cover of about 1,000 for those guys on the 3.5 stocking rate. So the most recent figures that we have would point to most people being on track for that, I suppose, James. So like if we looked at, we kind of broke the figures down for the average farm cover from the Grass 10 figures this week. So across the country, the average farm cover is about 860. Now, that doesn't take into account stocking rates. So if we break it down a bit further than that and we look at the stocking rates that fellas are working on, like your 2.5 livestock units, your cover on the 1st of September would want to be around 750. So it would want to be heading for around kind of 800, 850 next week, just to be on that target. And at the moment, lads are on about 840 at 2.5. So they are hitting that, if anything, or slightly ahead. So talk to a couple of lads in Grass 10, they're very happy with the way guys are building covers, I suppose. And it's just trying to keep on top of those pre-grazing covers and trying not to let them go mad ahead of you. So I suppose it's trying to keep cows into grass and try and keep the quality in the grass as well without getting into really, really heavy covers.
That's the place, Ciaran, I suppose, where usually when we look at this stage heading into the second week of September, in a lot of cases we'd be behind. And maybe not where we want to be in terms of cover. I suppose we're in a situation. Are you seeing farms there that are possibly in surplus and there needs to be a paddock taken out? Or I suppose what's the advice to farmers very much in terms of managing that cover, as you say now?
There is. And look, we do expect growth to drop off next week, right? I know we're in a heat wave and there's plenty of growth around at the moment, but to be brutally honest about it, I would be very surprised if growth was 60 next week, and I'd be much more in line for it to be around 45. So the growth prediction is coming in around that, and it will come in around that tomorrow as well, I think. So we're heading for that kind of drop off. So people need to be aware of that. At the same time, farmers know their farm the best themselves, and if you're stocked, if you're call it Midland stocked at 3 on the platform, and you have a farm cover at the moment of 12, 13, 1400, like you're going into massive covers. You're trying to graze out massive pre-grazing at the moment. So there is still scope to take out, a paddock for silage at the moment. Now, I wouldn't be telling lads to go off and do a third cut of silage or anything like that. Don't go mad. But at the same time, you know your farm best. And if you are if you're heading into covers and all you can see ahead of you is 2.5 ton, it might be no harm to take out one of those, just to keep the quality in front of the cows. And it's probably no harm to get it done before the fertilizer deadline that's coming up as well. So if you're thinking of doing it, today, tomorrow is the time to do it. You couldn't ask for better silage cutting conditions. This is the time to do it if you're thinking of doing it. And if you don't do it this weekend, the window is more or less gone. So I suppose, yeah, if you're thinking of acting, this is the time to do it.
Yeah. So it's really identifying that surplus, and I suppose maybe that's leading on into the next question in terms of, obviously, I should have said at the start, if anyone has any questions around PastureBase, anything, I suppose, related to PastureBase or grass related, do post them in the chat box, and I'll ask Ciaran as we go. But I suppose in terms of the tools within PastureBase, what should people be using, I suppose, as we head now through September, October into November? Yep.
Yeah, so look, the key tools to be using are the autumn rotation planner. You know, that'll set you up. You can detail it to how your farm is set up and how you want to, you know, the day you want to be having cows in the shed or the day you usually have cows in the shed, and back calculate from there. You know, now obviously you're probably in the thick of it a little bit at the moment, but you can still set it up and it will still be beneficial for you, particularly heading into that kind of October, November section of the year. The other thing to really focus on, I suppose, is use either the grass or the fodder budget. You know, they're really useful tools. I would say particularly the grass budget while you're still out at grass. You know, it'll let you slowly bring in silage supplementation for those cows, particularly heading for the second half of October. And once you have that budget set up and you have a little bit of planning done around it, you can really get an extra 10, 15 days of grass. Now, you might only be out by day, but you'll get that out of grass. And in situations where guys have a lot of maybe clover paddocks or new clover paddocks on the farm and they want to get them grazed down later on in the year to let the light into the base of that sward, it's really key that you're able to get cows out at that time of year. Obviously, I know you're going to say, well, you're going to feed the same amount of silage or you're going to feed the same amount of grass if you have the cows out full time until the end of October and then you have them in full time. But it's the idea of having the fresh grass in the diet into those days in November is really going to help with milking the tank as well. So I suppose it's key to use those two tools in particular. I would really push the autumn planner and the grass budget tool. Grass budget tool is very user friendly and guys can set it up to suit exactly their own conditions. Obviously, the fodder budget is very useful for keeping track of your silage stocks, but I suppose maybe it's a little bit later in the year again, even than what we're looking at the moment.
Yep. And for the vast majority of people, in terms of what are we looking at in terms of the last rotation when they are setting up this autumn rotation planner? What sort of dates are we looking at?
What sort of dates are you looking at? So I suppose it's the last rotation. You're going to be starting the last rotation kind of around the 1st of October, and then you're looking to have your 60% graze by the 1st of November, I suppose. So you're looking at that last 40% then through November. That's true for all stocking rates. And obviously, look, you tailor it to your soil type. Different parts of the country, there's no way you're going to have cows out in November. That's fine. Take your dates back. The autumn rotation planner will allow you to do that in PastureBase. You can tailor it exactly to what you want. When you want your 60% done, it might be the 20th of October, and that's fine. You know, there's no issue with it. But I suppose it's just having that plan in place and having something to follow and maybe check your rotation days on and check your pre-grazing covers on when you're getting to that time of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, I know up here in Ballyhaise, Donald would have tweaked it. He starts his last rotation maybe on the 25th of September, and some heavier farms will be similar in terms of, but it's really about setting targets for your farm, Ciaran, isn't it?
And I suppose the setting targets for your own farm, but the crucial thing about using a rotation planner is not, I said it there about staying out a little bit longer, you know, and getting that value in that autumn grass, and that's great, but it's really to set the place up for the spring when you're using that really valuable grass and being able to get out into reasonable covers in the spring when you're not going to, you know, you might only be out for 3 or 4 hours in the spring, but being able to get out into those reasonable covers and not being going out into forests of grass in the spring when you're struggling to get cows out and get them to eat anything. So you're looking for that quality in the spring, and you're really setting the farm up for spring quality in the autumn. So it's something to remember, I suppose, for the next month or two.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, given where costs are at the National Winter Milk Open, they were talking about them yesterday, and look at right across the industry in terms of costs have stayed obviously pretty high right throughout 2023. It's important that we do set the farm up right for spring 24. In terms then, I suppose, of just coming back maybe to the year 2023, or do you have any stats for us on that? It seems to have been very much either one or the other in terms of weather events, and it's been difficult. It's been challenging in terms of managing grass throughout 2023.
It has been a bit challenging, I suppose. So there's been a couple of things this year. I suppose the first thing, as you point out there, is the weather. Now the growth did slow down kind of May, June time, but it didn't. It wasn't as prolonged. Maybe now, obviously, I'm speaking generally. Different
Mm,
parts of the country will be different, but it wasn't as prolonged as what we saw in a couple of other years. Maybe particularly in 2018 and in 2020, there was kind of more prolonged periods of drought, but um. We didn't get as prolonged this year, and maybe it was more the wet weather that came in then in July and August that maybe slowed down some people's efforts in terms of making silage and stuff. So the growth has been quite steady, and it's been a reasonable grass growing year. I suppose one thing we would notice kind of from our own stuff, maybe here in Moore Park, and just talking to farmers around, is that a lot of people's grass growth is back because they've cut their nitrogen back a little bit, James. So I suppose unless you have, exceptional clover management, you're dropping your nitrogen, you're probably going to drop back in grass growth. And that's just, grass grows nitrogen, or nitrogen grows grass, sorry. So
mhm,
that's where we are with that. And that's just going to be a fact of life moving forward. So I suppose this is one of the first years that we've seen that grass is maybe a little bit back from that point of view, but that's a learning process for farmers moving forward. In terms of clover getting out on farms, it has been a good year for clover, I suppose. We have a lot of response to a bloat survey recently that we've done, and there's been over 600 responses, so it's been great to see. I haven't got any of the data kind of collated on that yet, but I suppose we'll be publishing some of that stuff kind of in the coming weeks, probably through the Grass 10 newsletter, just to see some of the quick results from that. Because I suppose anecdotally, we hear a lot of stuff coming back to us here about maybe bloat issues and about clover issues, and it's nice to get a fuller picture from that type of survey, and we'll be able to give more specific reasons maybe to the guys that have gotten bloat, and where that kind of came from, I suppose, and hopefully we can build management advice on that moving forward for next
mm.
year, where we won't run into the same issues.
Yeah, yeah. Look, and I think that's very important. That's obviously the one main concern at farm level, and the fact that there is work ongoing on that in terms of that is the best advice possible, and I suppose the best management practice possible at farm level are being put in place to mitigate that.
Yeah.
In terms of coming up towards the fertilizer deadline, then, Ciaran, any advice in terms of recommendations around fertilizer over the next number of days, or what's the thoughts on that?
Well, look, like, farmers are going to know themselves. It really depends on the plan. Obviously, if you've got grass paddocks and there's no clover in them, I would be saying go with your bag of urea at the moment, and get it out on as much of the farm as you can. No, within limits and within reason, obviously. Um, if you have any chemical phosphorus allowance as well, it wouldn't be a bad time to go looking for that as well. Anything in terms of a K allowance, potassium allowance for next while, look, there's no limit, and you can spread that well into the autumn. So I wouldn't be running out for your bag of muriate or anything at the moment. But it is an important nutrient for those clover fields. So if you're skipping nitrogen on clover fields at the moment, and you're just letting them alone for now and letting the clover in them, fair enough, but I would be looking to look at their P and K status, particularly their K status coming into the back end of the year, and just maybe replenishing that, because it is a hungry plant for potassium. In terms of those clover paddocks, farmers, you're going to know yourselves in terms of what's being built for the autumn and what paddocks are strong and not strong. Generally, we would have seen from some of the research here that those clover paddocks will still need maybe a half a bag of urea now, just to help build that cover going into the autumn, and maybe give them that extra bit of help, particularly on the higher stock farms, I suppose, where you really need to drive on that cover. So it is something to bear in mind, and maybe something that you can look at when you're spreading over the next week. You can look into, I suppose.
Yep, absolutely. I had one final question for you, maybe before we finish up, and it's around the derogation requirements and the number of walks, and something that I hope everybody is well aware of, and is our listeners are on top of it. But maybe just give us a brief, I suppose, reminder in terms of the requirements, Ciaran.
Yeah, so I suppose, look, the derogation stipulation from the Department of Ag has been that you need to do 20 walks in the calendar year, and those walks need to be 5 days apart, and that's the only stipulation at the moment. So in terms of getting walks done in particular months or anything like that, there's no stipulation around that. But I suppose from a guidelines point of view and from a pasture-based point of view, we'd much prefer guys to be doing their 1 walk in February, 2 in March, doing the walks April, May, June through the summer, and maybe then the close and cover at the back end of the year, along with maybe 2 walks in September. But if you're under pressure and you need to get those walks in, I'd say you're probably getting fairly tight, but you can still get those 20 walks in for the year, and they'll be uploaded fine. There's no issue with that. I suppose just key things to remember if you're new to using PastureBase, or you're getting just in the door with it, is that you can't backdate the covers more than 30 days. So that's, from our point of view, that's just a management thing. And we have a lot of data coming in, and trying to manage walks that are more than 30 days old really plays havoc with the system. So that's why we have a limit on it. And the second part of it as well is that keep ensuring that you're syncing. If you're using the app on the phone, make sure you're syncing those walks every time you do it, or the data will be lost when you do the new walk. So I suppose they're the 2 key things to remember when you're if you're new to using PastureBase for derogation reasons.
Yeah, no doubt all our listeners, they are all well over the 20 walks done at this stage.
Heading for 30, I'd say.
Absolutely, now you said it. I suppose maybe we'll finish up here, but is there anything new in the pipeline? There's been a lot of developments. Maybe you're going to tell me, leave me alone. James, we've enough done there, but
no. There is, and I suppose anybody that's logged into PastureBase in the last couple of days will have seen kind of the dashboard layout is changing a little bit, and we've got a couple of things coming on board. So during the year, actually, and this year in particular, got a lot of questions about liquid fertilizers. So that option is there now. So if you're getting a contractor in to spread fertilizer into next week, kind of just before the deadline, and they're spreading it through a sprayer for you, you do have a liquid option now in PastureBase, which you can use. So same as entering the artificial stuff. You just go in, select liters or gallons options instead of a kilos or tons options that you had before. The other thing, I suppose, we have the meal fed year to date option. So every farmer can check that now at the moment, and check how much meal they fed on a farm basis and a per cow basis. So it's actually quite a handy tool, particularly, I suppose, going through the summer to see where guys can drop it, but it's still handy now to see where you are for the year and what your target is. And as you said, it might be particularly useful now next year, James, when costs maybe are a bit more squeezed than what they have been so far, maybe over this year and last year. The last thing I would say that we brought in as well is an option to zero graze. So we have brought in an option on the wedge that you can use zero graze grass. And if farmers want to select that, they'll have to go to their profile in PastureBase, go to the farm that they have in PastureBase, and just click that option to enable zero grazing on the wedge. Just we didn't want to put it in for everyone, because I suppose it kind of a lot of people don't really use it. So we have it in for those guys that want it. You just have to enable it for yourself. And just to note, it won't affect the wedge, so it's treated exactly like buffer feed and silage, that we just put in zero graze grass instead of silage. And the reason that we didn't put it into affect the wedge is most people are using zero grazing from an outblock that they're not measuring on the wedge. So to avoid kind of confusion and that type of stuff, we kept it simple from that point of view.
Very good. Excellent. I suppose there's always developments coming, and it's just important maybe to highlight what is coming and to hear what you have been doing to develop PastureBase further. I suppose, look, I think we'll wrap up there. It was good to hear in terms of where we're at, and I suppose most importantly where we're at now heading into the autumn, but even right across the year, as you said, maybe growth isn't back as much as people think. It's probably more so that it was quality issues, Ciaran, throughout that summer period rather than actually growth issues. I suppose a quick synopsis. It's very much kind of know your number, know your target in terms of autumn grass. And
maybe just to re-emphasize, to set yourself up with those planners and those budgets, and take the 20 minutes, and set yourself up, and then you'll have it there handy every time you want to have a look at it.
Yeah, use the resources that is available.
Exactly.
Appreciate that, Ciaran. Thanks a million.
Cheers.
And
thanks very much, James.
No problem, Ciaran. No problem. Thanks for joining us. Next week, folks, we'll have Michael Dunne on to cover, I suppose, the main aspects of the National Winter Milk Open Day, which happened in Johnstown Castle yesterday. So Michael will join us next Thursday. As always, folks, there's lots going on. The weather, the sun is shining, thank God. There's lots going on farms, so do stay safe, and we'll talk to you all again next week. Thanks again, Ciaran.